Hi, this is Michelle Hoskin, and I'm the founder and director of Standards International. And I am extremely delighted to be joined today by Sam Frost, who is not only a very dear friend of mine, but is also an amazing professional businesswoman who is working in the space of wellbeing. So Sam, it's very nice to have you on, and just give everybody a bit of an intro into you.
Into me. Hello. So yeah, I work in the field of corporate wellbeing. My company is Think Consulting, and I take care of the wellbeing arm. So really helping organisations to work out how to do wellbeing. And I also sit on a number of boards as the wellbeing lead and as a wellbeing governor at my daughter's school. So something that I've really moved into in the last couple of years, because it's been a particular area of interest. And also been very lucky to work with yourself and Standards International on some of the fantastic wellbeing initiatives that you have going on at the moment, which I'm sure we will talk about.
Well, thank you for that. I think when you and I obviously first met, we obviously met in a school summer fair, wasn't it, in front of the Helter Skelter and the bounce. I remember thinking at the time, I think we're going to go far. We're going to go. Woman, you looked so well dressed and so organized, and there's me like in sportswear. I thought this is the kind of woman I need to have in my life. Absolutely. so we've obviously become very good friends, but particularly I'm very interested in the work that you're doing in the wellbeing space, and just for everybody's kind of information. So obviously Standards International is a standards body, but it's not just a standards body. It is also an organization that trains, consults and assessors, financial planners, financial planning businesses, specifically obviously within this space. And we are always looking at better ways that they can do business, be in business, serve their clients, look after their team. And, this has been a 25-year journey that has been continual for me personally, the team as I've grown it. And I think when we started talking about wellbeing, we floated the idea about having and coming up with a wellbeing standard. And what we didn't know at the time was that there was actually an ISO standard being drafted in the area of wellbeing, which has since become ISO 45003, an occupational health and wellbeing standard for businesses, any business in any sector. But obviously our sector is financial services, and that's our family, but we're not exclusively going to serve the needs of that sector, but we are going to be reaching out to other industries. So I just want to kind of, we are working on this together. The scheme's been launched, and obviously you're working with the team here at Standards International to go through and identify what evidence we would be looking for as an assessment body. And I thought it'd just be really, really good to have a conversation. I'm just going to bring my little notes up here, to have a little conversation around, what we thought about wellbeing, what wellbeing meant to you, what it means to me. And how that sort of, some tips and tricks and, sort of insights into what you're doing, what we're doing, and also how we can help the businesses, and also, what the businesses can do. So I have got a little set of questions, which I know you've seen in advance. So I'll kick us off. So for you, what does well-being mean to you?
So I think it's feeling good in yourself. And I think we know when we're a bit off kilter, when something's not quite right, because you know that your resilience levels have dropped. And when I think of everything that's been thrown at us all over the last couple of years, we've had to withstand a lot. But if you've got good well-being, you can absorb that and still function well. And I think what's key for me is, despite everything that's thrown at you, you can still find joy in the things that you love doing. So, you and I went through lockdown together, and you'd see me jogging past your house once a morning, whatever, we'd have a little wave. But it's, despite everything that was going on, I still knew that going for my jog or reading or listening to music or watching TV or something, seeing a friend for half an hour for a doorstep chat, I still enjoyed those moments. Absolutely. So I still had good levels of well-being. And I think that when you know in yourself, I really used to love doing that, and I'm just not getting the same vibe from it anymore, or I'm not pushing myself to do it. I think that's when I need to start reaching out a bit more and getting some help.
Yeah, I think the joy piece is key. I think it's like when does well-being fall into the sort of depths of mental ill health, fall into depression, fall into suicidal thoughts. It's almost like this sliding scale. And I think the reason I love the piece around well-being, I mean, you and I, for those of you watching, listening, Sam and I did the mental health first aider training together. And what Sam and I are also going to be looking at, although COVID did scupper this a little bit, was to actually become mental health first aider trainers. And that's not necessarily because we want to train other people, but it's to gain that next level of in-depth knowledge around mental health. And I remember us literally going, oh my God, this whole area is incredible. But I felt that by the time that has to intersect, like the mental health piece, it's almost, for me, in my mind, past the well-being piece.
Yeah.
Like well-being is so preventative. Like as an employer, well-being for me is perfectly as you've said it. But I think, like I almost see it as the step before mental health. I know it's not that at all, because it's all rolled into one. But in my mind, it's like, positive, healthy, good well-being in all areas of our life is really the tip of the iceberg for me. And then it goes deeper under the waterline.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that also is understanding your own triggers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your own stress responses.
Yeah.
So it's, how do I recognize signs of stress in myself? Is it that I'm getting irritable? I'm not sleeping. I'm leaning on crutches like alcohol or food too much or something like that. And once you understand how you function, then you can start to recognize, okay, I need to cut in here and do something different, or ask for some help, so that it doesn't escalate to the point of needing, something further down the line.
Just to add one thing, because you just triggered a thought in my mind. So how they talk about when people have mental ill health, or their well-being isn't where it should be in terms of to make them happy and have joy. You've just talked about there about having a crutch and an addiction or whatever it might be to alcohol or drugs. One of the signs that I think is missed often is a person's addiction to being quite needy, as in so. We've got a friend that we both know, a person that we both know, and she's in a relationship where her partner is really, really, really needy. And to the point that she's become his emotional crutch. And it's because he's got mental ill health and his well-being's not well. So I think in the workplace, for example, and in friendship circles, I think when people are a little bit agitated or they're demonstrating signs of frustration, these can also be signs of not good well-being, because they're just on a very, very small tight fuse. But equally, they are their characteristics are changing. It's like the point you were saying just before. It's like, these things did make me happy, now they don't. Now I'm just dead annoyed at everything, and I'm actually not very happy. I think you're right, and we've never really had that conversation before. We've talked about well-being in a huge context, but it's quite interesting to get your take on it, because I agree with you absolutely 100%.
Yeah, and I think it's, unfortunately, I think we tend to speak in fairly general terms. It's like, you and I have talked about not using the word, oh, I'm stressed, or it's like, well, what does that actually mean? And it's like, that's kind of too general, like, So I think that if people talk in generalizations, then they lose the ability to actually pinpoint exactly how I'm feeling and what's that trigger, and so what can I do about it. So I think it's really understanding yourself and the people that you're around all the time. Absolutely. Because as you said, if you might be feeling fine, but if you're with someone, or there's someone around you who is really struggling, the impact that has on you is absolutely huge, and you can't neglect what it's going to do to you, as well as what it might be doing to them.
I mean, we'll come back to language. I think, I haven't really put a question to you about language, but I think we'll try and come back to it if we can. Obviously, I mentioned there, you and I did the mental health first aider course together. What were your biggest takeaways from doing that? Because it was an emotional, like, roller coaster, wasn't it? I mean,
it really was. So we did the mental health first aid training for adults, and then we both went back and did it for kids, because we're both mums. I mean, that was full on, but I remember very clearly the session that kind of broke me was around the child suicide. And I remember we were reading about the case study of that young girl who had tried to take her own life and luckily was unsuccessful, but there was a point I remember so well where she said, when someone asked her, are you thinking about doing this? She said the relief that someone had finally asked that question. And it was such a light bulb moment for me, because it's a fallacy, and this is what they taught us on the course, right? It's a fallacy to think, oh, I mustn't ask someone because I might give them the idea.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like, you're never going to give someone the idea. If you're worried, you have to ask. And this girl was saying that she had been feeling like that, but how can I bring that up with my parents or my sister or my friend? Like, how do you even have that conversation knowing what it will do to them? And she said the fact that somebody just asked me and all I had to do was say yes. And then suddenly it's all out of the open and it can be talked about. And that was the turning point for her. And that really kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, wow, if I ever worry about it, I have to ask that question, because you may be the only person who's asking the one question that they need to be able to answer.
That I need to be asked.
Yeah.
I'm scared of asking it. I agree. And I think on that point, they say that, I mean, we're talking about suicide specifically because of your takeaway, but, they reckon it's about 137 people that are impacted by a suicide. And the stats are off the scale in terms of those that, are unsuccessful in taking their own lives. And just one point for everybody on that. We should never say have committed suicide. And it's because the reason the term is used, committed suicide, is because it was illegal. So it was like committed a crime. Like committed theft, committed burglary, committed suicide. It was illegal. And if you were successful in committing suicide, obviously you were dead. And if you were unsuccessful, wasn't it something like their families would be, no, if you'd successfully committed suicide, the families would be on the rack for it, basically. And if you'd been unsuccessful in taking your own life, you would be on the rack for it. And obviously the laws have changed now, but that's where the committed suicide thing. So if you are ever in a situation where you feel you want to ask somebody, you never say, are you thinking of committing suicide? It's always, are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you considering taking your own life? That kind of thing. So I just wanted to put that in, really. I think if we bring that back to the workplace, because obviously, you talked about that in the child context, but the same thing would apply in the adult context. And I think mental ill health in the workplace is becoming, based on the point you just said, it's just good to keep talking about it.
Absolutely.
It's good to just have the poster on the staff, the staff wall in the kitchen, and it's good to have these open conversations. The one for me, which does link to the work we're doing, was the one in the adult course about the stress bucket.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd never really been able to put it into words.
Yeah.
I always used to say, I'm feeling so overwhelmed. That's what I would say, overwhelmed. And I remember a few days after doing it, obviously we were in lockdown and it was all a bit emotionally charged anyway, the sessions we did and being in lockdown. And I'd had a busy day. I was homeschooling Ruby. And I remember we were sitting on my bed and she wanted to show me all of her Lego cards and she was full on. Get it? And she was 9, 10. And I said, Ruby, I just need to draw you a picture. And I literally drew her the stress bucket. I said, Mummy needs to sleep and rest because I need to turn the tap at the bottom of the bucket to let some of the pressure out.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because she understood, and we had watched a movie and we just had some quiet time. And relating that to the workplace, I suppose, and one of the reasons I did it was to bring this stuff back to the workplace and to the clients is, we can all only take so much. And we need a release valve. And if we're working all day and into the night and we're not sleeping properly, the tap's not going on to let the stress, let the overwhelm out to release there. So that was mine. And I think, we learned so much, didn't we? I mean, it was just an incredible, one of the things I've been saying to people, like particularly financial planners, advisors, and I did a webinar the other day in prep for Mental Health Week, which is obviously this week as we're recording this. And I said to them, that, we were talking about, mental health, and in financial services, we talk a lot about financial well-being. Yeah. And I've said many times, I was like, there's no such thing as financial well-being. There's only well-being. Yeah. There's only well-being. Yeah. The mental health conversations need to be had in the workplace openly.
And I think to that point, it's like saying, we all have mental health. I mean, this is what a lot of people are at pains to say, you know, we are all, and maybe this is another takeaway from the course for me as well, that I thought was so true, that there's a spectrum, right, between firing all cylinders and feeling great and feeling absolutely at your worst. That's the mental health spectrum, and we're all on it, and it's not static.
No.
We all move up and down and up and down. And I think if you can accept that and understand it, automatically a lot of that stigma is gone. Because it might be, okay, so right now you're down there and I'm up here, but you know, things will shift. And so I think that helps to break it down a little bit. And I've also heard some people on other webinars talking about brain health.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually, that's quite a good way of looking at it as well, because it also helps to take away some of the stigma. So I think the language that we use is so important in terms of creating that psychological safety in the workplace.
I agree.
Where we need to be in a position where people can talk about it without worrying about what it's going to do to their career. And it starts from the top, right? That's where leaders have to be open and create that environment where if you flag this or you raise your concerns, it's not going to come back to bite you.
Well, equally, I think, you know, we'll come on to what you're doing at ICAS and obviously what you're doing with boards yourself. But I think, you know, the stats, I mean, I don't have any specific stats to share on this conversation, but, you know, the stats are high. We are all on that mental health scale, like you just said. And I think a bit of vulnerability from the top actually goes a long way. You know, I will be the first person, and I've stood in a conference centre in front of, you know, 500 people and said that at my lowest, I nearly drove my car into a central reservation on purpose. And I'm not telling anybody that, you know, I mean, it was bad. It was a bad time, very, very bad time. You know, I'd been in a relationship breakup. But what that does is that means that then everybody else doesn't feel intimidated,
embarrassed,
or, you know, for little Miss Wow and all the jazz hands I've got. I've had bad days, like bad days.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think it comes from the top. So tell me a little bit about sort of, you know, specifically, obviously, which we're talking in line with the standard kind of, but in your mind, you know, what are those things that the sort of senior leadership team need to be doing, should be doing, you know, to sort of champion this?
So this can't be a paid lip service exercise. It has to have genuine buy-in from the top down, because if it's not right from the very top, then there is always that fear of reprisal or fear of consequence for raising things.
Yeah.
So it has to come from the top. But the people at the top also have to make sure that they're empowering those around them. And I think with wellbeing, certainly, you know, you and I have said, and I've seen with other companies as well, that all too often this is being handed to HR as, well, here you go, you're HR, that's kind of your space, so you deal with it, but with no additional training or resources or understanding. So I think it's, if we're going to do this properly in an organisation, then the people at the top have to set it up for success. They have to put the structures in place and make sure that the people around them are trained and informed and skilled and willing and able to do what they need to do to sort of drive initiatives on.
So do you think, just on that, you mentioned HR there. So in my head, I've got HR is reactive.
Yeah.
Wellbeing leads, and HR today is more proactive.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of, almost like, you know, if I was a CEO of a company and I thought, you know, is my people piece proactive or reactive? Yeah. And if my response was, well, we react to whatever's going on, then we've not got well-being and our people at the heart of our business, because we're only reacting to whatever is thrown at us at any given moment. Do you think that's a fair, simple way of describing it?
Yeah, I think it would be. And I think, you know, we all know it's obviously far better to put the stuff in place than deal with it at the other end, right? And I think, you know, I did a webinar for ICAS recently on the importance of psychological safety in the workplace. And a question was posed about, well, how do you get leaders on board, you know, if they think, oh, it all sounds a bit fluffy and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what, if you've tried everything and nothing else is working, go with a very, very simple line. It affects your bottom line. Like, no doubt about it. If you have a psychologically safe workforce, they will be engaged.
Absolutely.
And therefore you're going to make more money. Yeah. And I talked about Google, who launched Project Aristotle, because they wanted to work out what was the key to their success. And after, you know, I think they researched 180 Google offices around the world, interviews and surveys and research and all sorts. Why are we so successful? And the number one metric that they said was the key to their success was the fact that their staff were engaged, the teams were engaged, and they felt safe at work. You know, well, if that doesn't tell you how important it is for the bottom line, I don't know what will. But so leaders need to really understand this isn't the fluffy stuff. This has a real tangible effect on your business. And if you get it right up front when you're being proactive, then you don't have to deal with the financial and other complications of absenteeism and sick days and complaints and staff turnover, which is hugely expensive for a company. And recruitment. I mean, they said, I think some of the stats are about, for everyone you lose, it costs you about 20% of that salary to find a replacement, and then another 20% to train them. So think about the money you save if you can reduce your churn. I mean, it just makes more sense.
I think I agree, and I think another way of also looking at it is from the top is, you know, if I think about myself as an owner of a business, I mean, I'm very pro all this stuff anyway, but you know, if I was thinking about it and I was thinking, right, if my Ruby worked for somebody and Ruby spent 8 hours of a day, 5 days a week in the care of an employer, how would I want her to be looked after? That's my benchmark, right? I think about, and if I think about if my brother worked in a company, what would, and all that. But I also think that it's about, you know, you mentioned their safety, right? So psychological safety, you know, occupational health and safety, it's all kind of the same thing. But, you know, it's interesting because looking at this, the actual standard, it's talking about hazards, you know, what are the hazards in the workplace? And I'll be honest, like, you know, in the olden days, right? Let's go back 10 years, pre-COVID particularly, you'd be like trips, you know, you hold your tray with your cup,
pick up the box wrong.
your cables are under your desk and your bag and your coat. Now it's workload, it's working with colleagues, it's good communication or bad communication as a hazard, it's wrong management and leadership style, it's working for narcissists, it's and it's the list is endless, and it's nothing to do with the tray with the 4 cups of tea on it, right? I think that's what I love about the workplace well-being piece at the moment, is it's about psychological health and safety, and you know, our primal as humans need is to feel safe. And I did a whole webinar yesterday, right, on trust, and I could have summarized and saved myself 40 minutes and said it in one sentence. If I'm your employer, right, and you're working in a team with my team, it doesn't matter whether I trust you. It's more about whether you trust me to take care of you. You trust me to have your back. You trust me as the employer. And I think that's the shift for me. We all talk about, well, I don't trust him, you know, he's not very good at his job. It's kind of irrelevant in today's world, really. I mean, it's important, but it's not as important as you as the employer trusting, as you as the employee trusting me as the employer. And I think that's where the well-being bit comes in, to take care of you, to protect you, to keep an eye on you, because you're there 8 hours a day minimum.
And I think that's one of them, just the massive changes that we've seen. So I'm a mentor at a few organisations, but one of them is my old university. Excuse me. So I'm speaking to graduates and undergrads a lot, and the conversations I'm having with them, I would never have had a few years ago when I was in their shoes. They're saying things to me like, "Oh, I would never go and work for that company because there's no work-life balance." And what are they going to do for me? And I'm like, well, that wasn't even a question that occurred to me when I was trying to find a job out of uni.
Now it is.
So I think you've got, you know, a couple of things. You've got this great resignation that we keep hearing about that was probably starting in the States first and is now rolling through here. So you've got people leaving in droves. And one of the startling stats I heard recently was, I think McKinsey's did a survey in the States, and of the people who were leaving, 40% of them didn't even have another job to go to.
I know, it's credible.
They just wanted out. I mean, that's bonkers. So you've got that happening, but then you've got the new generation of people coming into the workplace who have just spent their A-levels or university last couple of years in lockdown, coming into the workplace. And the attitude is, what are you going to do for me? how are you going to make this work for me?
Absolutely.
So I think whether we think that's right or wrong, and part of me is old school, so part of me is like, well, you know, you have to suck up a little bit of stress, but you know, but regardless of what you feel about that, that is the situation that employers find themselves in.
Well, it's interesting because I do a lot of coaching and through kind of webinar structures and formats for those trying to get into financial services, and so many of them are asking me. I get messages on LinkedIn going, you know, I want to get into a financial services firm, but you know, I want one that's got good work-life balance, work-life effectiveness. I've got a good well-being strategy. Well, you know, I know what they mean, of course, and so do they. But the problem is the employers don't know what they mean. So if they're asked in an interview, what's your wellbeing strategy? They're going to be like that.
Oh, well, we've got fruit bowls and yoga on Fridays.
We've got snacks. We've got teacup station. But yeah, the whole workplace is changing. And I think that's why, you know, when obviously we have firms go through the standard certification, and they display the little, you know, ISO 45003 wellbeing certification mark. It's a beacon because they know, you know, word will get out.
It's looked for now.
Organisations are looking after their people.
That's it.
I remember years ago, a friend of mine, I think he worked for Goldman Sachs. I want to say it's Goldman Sachs, and his words to me, literally in the playground, were, "You literally sell your soul to the devil." Was basically what he was saying to me. And I was like, that's not a life. Now, he got paid oodles of money, right? He was flipping loaded. He had loads of money. Never saw his wife or his kids. And actually, he was knackered most of the time. Well, now he's like, nah, not doing it. It's not even worth the money unless they've got these strategies in place, right? So I think that's the key point with the standard and the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
Now, you just mentioned ICAS. Yeah. Tell me about what you're doing at ICAS, because I actually, we haven't really chatted about it properly. I think I know some stuff, but actually, I'm actually equally personally very interested in your work at ICAS. So talk to me a bit about that.
So for anyone who doesn't know, so ICAS is the Institute for Chartered Accountants of Scotland. We have 2 chartered accountancy institutes in Britain. There's England and Wales, and there's Scotland. It's almost irrelevant which one you train with. I happen to train with Scotland. So I trained with them. I got my CA exams through them many years ago.
When was this? Lots of years ago.
You don't ask me to give you a date, Michelle. That's going to age me. I got my CA in 2005, 5. So
a few years ago then. 100 years ago.
100 years ago. And then I really didn't have an awful lot to do with them because, you know, I moved abroad, as you know. I lived in Australia for 15 years and blah, blah, blah. And I sort of just paid my subscription each year so I could keep CA after my name. And then a couple of years ago, obviously in lockdown, and I started hearing that ICAS were doing a lot of stuff in the wellbeing space. And obviously we all listen to an awful lot of webinars. And I was listening to one almost in the background once, and I could hear them talk, and I was thinking, wow, they are really on the front foot with this stuff. And what they're saying is really resonating with me because they're talking about their students and the stress of going through the CA exams. I can't tell you how stressful the CA exams were for me. I found them incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful. And they were talking about all this kind of stuff. And long story short, I thought, oh, I'd love to be involved in somehow. So I fired off some emails to them, had some conversations. Lo and behold, a few months later, I was appointed to the board. It makes it sound a little bit more simple than it was. But anyway, so I found myself on the board, and which was fantastic. And I'm now the board lead for student and member wellbeing.
Amazing.
Which is fantastic. And I'm so chuffed to be part of it because they are so focused and dedicated on all this wellbeing stuff. There is such a genuine drive behind what they're doing. And we've got some wonderful initiatives already in place with lots more coming, but they've got, so on the ICAS website, for example, there's a wellbeing hub that is filled with stuff like this and articles and hints and tips and interviews and all sorts of things. There's a 24/7 helpline for anyone to call if you need any kind of help or referrals. They do an annual CA summit, and I co-hosted last year's, and the focus was wellbeing. They've set up a mentoring scheme, and I'm one of their mentors. So anyone can, you know, come for helps and tips and advice. and all the ICAS staff are mental health first aid trained.
Amazing.
I mean, they set a goal. They had a 3-year plan, and we're in year 2. They set a 3-year plan to be the gold standard in occupational organisational wellbeing, and they're really putting their money where their mouth is. So I'm just really chuffed to be part of it.
So even the likes of ICAS could do the wellbeing standard, couldn't they?
Anyone could. Anyone could. I mean,
I love the fact that they've done that as a professional organisation, that they're taking that great care of their members. And you know what? That's that's what I want Standards International to be. So, you know, we want to be launching, you know, a tool by which we can check in on the well-being of all of our clients, and we keep an eye on them. Because, you know, if they're keeping an eye on all of their clients, who's keeping an eye on them? Nobody.
Yep.
That's something that I want us to do as an organisation. So, yeah, that's great what they're doing, and great congratulations for you also.
Oh, no, it's lovely to be part of it. And it's, you know, every conversation I have, you know, you don't ever get off the phone thinking, I'm not sure they're really believing it. Like, they completely believe in what they're trying to do, and they're getting lots and lots of people involved. And to one of our earlier points, people in very senior positions are speaking quite openly about their own mental health challenges and experiences, which is really helping. I mean, that was the goal for year 1, to break down the stigma. So they're on a good path.
How fabulous. We could flip and talk all day, couldn't we? I suppose the final question, because we've sort of touched on tips, and you know, how do you think the role of the employer will change in the next 2 to 5 years, with the standard in mind? I think, because obviously that's the future direction of travel, of course, but go on, what do you think?
Well, I think, you know, we've had this huge shift in what people now expect from a workplace, but I think the expectations aren't just coming from bottom up, they're coming from top down. And I think it's inevitable that, you know, say 10 years ago, we might not have thought that companies would have to report on their sustainability targets, for example. We are going to be in a place where companies are going to have to report on staff engagement levels, well-being levels. I really think this is going to become normal standard practice, that this stuff has to be tracked and reported, because it's going to be up there with the finances and the operations. You know, it's such a key part. Your people are your biggest asset. It's so key and so integral to how well a company functions, that I think it's inevitable we're going to get some, you know, statutory requirements around it.
Absolutely.
So why not get on the front foot now and start trying to build those frameworks?
Well, look at it like this. You know, you've got, you know, you have to have a first aider, health and safety first aider in your business with 5 or more employees. It's going to be the same for mental health first aiders.
Absolutely.
Sure. I think the point you make about ICAS there, and you know, all of their team are mental health first aider trained. You know, I think that every organisation should have every member of their staff mental health first trained, so that actually that by just doing that is sending the message in an organisation that this is a skill. We all need to be able to have it, so that we can support each other, not just the bosses supporting all the team. It's the colleagues. And actually, you know, it's funny because after we did the course, you know, I walked to the station, I think that one of the afternoons, and there was a lady crying. She was crying. Well, she looked like she was crying, and she had a headset on. And I walked past her, and I was like, no, I can't just walk past her. So I did a turn around on the spot. I walked past, and I put my hand on her shoulder. I said, excuse me, are you okay? I noticed that you were crying. She went, no, I'm not. She went, no, I'm not. She went, it was hay fever.
Okay, I'll go.
The thing was, I went, I'm so sorry, but I've just done a mental health first aid course, and I really couldn't have walked past you. This poor woman's being accosted in the street by me. There's no way I could have walked past her.
No,
and it just opens up your eyes.
Yeah.
Going on, right? So I think the mental health first aiders, I think you're right, and I think the leading from the top, I think, is key. I think the other thing as well is, I think it's, for me, how the employer bit will change is, you can't just fob this off to the HR person. You know, you need wellbeing champions in the team. You need, you know, a wellbeing lead, and that's where the likes of you, and there are others kind of wellbeing consultants who are going into organizations, you know, are really adding some really juicy value. It's incredible what they're doing, really, isn't it?
Well, I think, and I think the key questions that I'm hearing from clients is, how do I do this, and how do I know if I'm getting it right?
Yeah.
Because it feels fluffy. right? That's the thing, it feels fluffy. So you have to take the fluff out of it, which means you need a framework and structures. And it's very simple in terms of how do you know you're doing it right? Well, then you have to know what data you need to be tracking. Well, what data do you need to collect? You need to know what your risks are and what risks you need to be tracking in your organization. So it's very easy to unpack it and to make it clear and structured and put processes around it. But you need to get the right people on board to be able to ask the right questions.
You do, and actually, I'm going to grab it because it's actually in my bag. But this is a copy of 45,003, and it's actually a published document. Obviously, it's pages and pages of it. But this is a framework. It talks about the risks. It talks about understanding external issues, internal issues. Understanding the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties, financial security, social interaction and support, inclusion, recognition. This is the framework, right? You know, and I think if anybody is interested in looking at it as a standard for their organization and for their workplace, and we would be delighted to. At the moment, we are, as we're recording this, we have opened up an expression of interest form on our website, so we can collate those organizations that are interested in showing interest at this phase, because we're going to have a launch of it. And if obviously you're watching this, post the launch, just get on with it. We will be able to, as we design and launch the scheme more thoroughly, we'll be able to put you in touch with experts like Sam, consultancies, tools, systems that will be able to support you to meet the requirements of the standard, and display that mark. And you'll see it on our web pages, as I'm sure where you're picking this video up from. So yeah, I mean, it's massive. And it's amazing. I feel like it's almost like it's because when we do standards and the conversations that we've had about businesses generally, I almost feel like what this wellbeing thing does, it's like it puts a massive red ribbon around everything a business does for its clients, for its team, for everybody, and it puts a big red ribbon on the top. And for me, that's the kind of completion bit. I think it's awesome. It's so good what you're doing.
It's applicable to companies of any size. I mean, I did, when I was the consultant for a similarly structured ISO in Australia, I was, putting the same structures in place for small family companies that had 6 employees and huge multi-corporate. So it's, you scale up or scale down. But what it does is it prompts the conversations that every company needs to have, which is, where do we want to be going? Where could things go wrong for all our workers? What do our stakeholders need? What do our customers need? I mean, these are conversations that you should be having anyway. It's just about, and it's just about taking the results of that and then putting them into the right boxes so you can build up a picture of what you need to be doing.
Amazing. Have you got anything else you want to add to this? Because I mean, literally, probably every webinar and video says this, but we could talk about it for flipping days, couldn't we? But I mean, is there anything that's on the tip of your tongue that you want to be said?
I think what I would say, particularly in relation to the standard, is I wouldn't want anyone to be concerned or put off by thinking, oh, it's probably a bit overwhelming or too much for us to get, because it's really not. It's just the conversations that you need to have. And I've had so many clients saying to me, I want to do more. I had someone saying to me, I'm so sick of telling my team, make sure you get enough sleep and go for a walk after lunch. He said, I mean it, and I want to give them more. I just don't know what to say, but I'm worried about them. And I can see that in a few years down the track, the people who are just starting off in work now aren't getting that exposure. They've been working from home, and I'm expecting them to go out and lead teams in a few years' time. These problems are not even going to manifest themselves for a few years. I want to do something now. Right. So I would say, well, this is a great way of working out how to start and get it. We were talking about being proactive rather than reactive. This is the way to put all those proactive measures in place.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I mean, the only thing it kind of is the same thing as you, just was that on my mind is, don't be scared of well-being. We've all got it. Whether it's good or bad, whether it's at the bottom of the scale, the top of the scale, or somewhere in the middle. One of the things we say in the work we do is understand your people, and then you'll unleash their power. for you, for themselves, and ultimately you'll help them achieve their potential, and then you'll just become a beacon of, you know, gosh, of people that just want to work, because people talk. You know, my employer does this, you know, they really take care of me. You know, we've got this team day and that team day, and we have, you know, regular check-ins with our, you know, employee assistant program, all this sort of stuff. It's all wonderful stuff. So mine's similar to yours, but just don't be scared of the word. Don't be scared of the words mental health and well-being. So listen, it's been an absolute delight. I love you so much, and I love being your friend as well as working with you as well.
Oh, bless you. Feelings mutual.
And I think we've got a lot of exciting things to do, and you know, I'm very excited about getting into these organisations and seeing what they're doing.
Making some real change.
Really, yeah, absolutely. So with the journey is going to be exciting. Thank you so much for your time as always. And if anyone has any questions, wants further information, then just reach out to us. Details on the website, or you can pick us up on social media. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.